Guys, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if it's your first time here. I'm in a bit of a different spot today, so if you see like boxes behind me, no you don't. The lighting's better in here, it's quieter in here, so we're switching it up today for my January wrap up. I read 9 books and had 1 DNF in January, which is crazy, way more than I thought I was going to read, but I'm very happy with it. And I had overall like a really great reading month, so we're going to jump right into it. I'm actually going to start with the DNF. I usually go in chronological order, like what I read first, but since I DNF'd, I just want to get that out of the way because I don't want to dwell on that one very much. So the book I DNF'd is called If You Lie. I think that's what it's called, by Caleb Stevens. And I read half of this book before I just decided to put it down because I did not like it. I thought the writing was atrocious. This book, let me tell you what it's about. This is a thriller on Kindle Unlimited, and it follows this girl who has a true crime podcast because she had a near death incident in her life, and she wanted to kind of dedicate the rest of her life to bringing awareness to true crime and victims and all that kind of stuff. And she's also estranged with her older sister, and she gets a email or a text from her sister kind of out of the blue one day, years later, and she wants to reconnect. She wants to rebuild their relationship, and she's also engaged to be married to a rich man who has a yacht and is taking a bunch of her and her friends on this cruise and invites her sister to come along. So she decides to go. There's red flags the entire way. She's like, my sister's friends are acting really weird. I don't really like this. And it's basically like a cult story. And so much happens and yet nothing happens in this book. And the writing was really, really bad, really, really cringy. And it just was not interesting to me at all. And I thought it was just kind of bad. And everything, like every step of the way up to the halfway point where I put it down, was predictable. So I just really was not vibing with it. And I decided to DNF. Moving on to the books that I did read. So I started off my January, reading and listening to Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield. The narration of this one on audio was so, so good. Highly recommend that. And I'm not usually an audiobook girl, which we'll talk about later. But this book follows a married couple. One of them is basically like works for this company that like explores the ocean. I'm pretty sure that's what it is, but she goes on all of these like deep sea missions. And so she's assigned to one that's only supposed to last like a couple of days to a week. And they end up losing contact with the submarine and they're gone for months. And everybody on this trip dies, but then this one woman survives. So they call up her wife and they're like, hey, like, she's back, she's alive, can you come pick her up? She's like, oh my gosh, like, of course. Goes and picks up her wife. They go back home, and her wife is not the same at all. She is so different. She's not really speaking, and you can tell that something's really, really off. And you're getting split point of view, and split timeline. So you're getting the current day from the wife who's like taking care of her wife, just kind of like what is going on, like what is wrong with her, what happened while she was in the ocean, like she's not telling me, I don't know what's happening. And then you're getting point of views from the other woman while she was in the submarine. And I thought that this was written absolutely beautifully. This is very lyrical, beautiful prose. It's very haunting, and it's very emotional as well. This book is basically about what happens when you really, really love somebody, but they start becoming somebody different in front of your eyes, and you don't really know what to do anymore. I thought it was really beautiful. It was literary and horror, like a very nice blend of the two, but lots of body horror in this that I thought was done really, really well. And the ending was so good and emotional. So I gave this a 3.75 stars. It was just a little bit slow, but I did really like it. Next, I picked up Sky Full of Elephants by Kibo Campbell. I gave this a 4 stars. This book was really, really good. This book is essentially a dystopian-esque novel about a day when all of the white people in the States or in the world go to the nearest body of water and drown themselves. Um, and that just launches this really unique story that is asking a lot of questions about what the world would be like without white people, how society would shift and change and look different. And I thought it was really beautiful. I thought this was a very heavy book, but it did it so well. This author has beautiful prose, knows how to write. It was very deeply emotional. I felt very connected to the characters. I cared about their stories so much. You're following a father-daughter duo who during this incident, the father was incarcerated, and after all of the white people drown themselves, the prisons are let out, and his teenage daughter contacts him. They've never met. Because he's her only surviving family member. She's mixed. All of her white family has died. She's grieving. She's confused. She's scared. And you just kind of follow their relationship together. You follow this journey that unfolds. And I thought it was really, really good. The reason it wasn't 5 stars, I think the pacing really suffered. The pacing was a little bit off and just kind of weird. Like some parts were too long, some parts were too short. And I wish that we would have spent a little bit more time developing the relationship between the father and daughter. I feel like they kind of skirted past some really big things too quickly. But aside from that, no complaints. Then I read Kindred by Octavia E. Butler, first book I've read by this author, and I definitely want to read more. I did give this book 3.5 stars. I know that's controversial. This book would have been rated much higher, I think, if I had read it physically. And I do want to revisit the physical copy of this book because I did solely audio for this and I did not like the audio narrator whatsoever. This book is very heavy and very serious. You're following a woman and her husband, but like mainly this woman. They're living in like modern day. I forget when this was written. I want to say like 80s, like so modern day at the time, 80s, and she starts time traveling like by accident back to Antebellum South as a black woman. So you can imagine how that goes. She keeps like time traveling back to this plantation and has to survive and has to figure out why this is happening, who these people are, because clearly she's has some kind of connection to these people, trying to find her way back to her husband. And I don't know, I think this was a very powerful story about racism, about slavery, about misogyny, about so many hard hitting and very heavy topics. And they are not shied away from in this novel. It's brutal. But I just think the narration style took away from the seriousness and the depth of this book. And like some of those hard hitting scenes that I think would have really like destroyed me to read physically was dampened by the unserious nature of the narrator. So that's kind of how I feel about Kindred. 3.5 stars. Would definitely want to revisit this, and I want to read more of this author's work. I also think I went into this expecting more sci-fi because she's always described as like a sci-fi novelist, and it definitely has an aspect of that, but it is not the main focus of her stories. So that was my misunderstanding, not like a fault of the narrator or the author. Next, I picked up Animal Farm by George Orwell. I gave this 5 stars. Of course, this is a classic for a reason. I'm not going to go too much into this because everyone knows about Animal Farm, whether you've read it or not. That being said, I think this is a perfect time to either pick this book up for the first time or to revisit it if you haven't read it since high school or years and years ago, because it's very relevant. Stories like this, unfortunately, probably are always going to be relevant, but I had a great time with this. It was also like really, really funny and just very timely, and I enjoyed it, of course. I wanted this to be my year of getting into more series and actually seeing them through and completing them instead of just picking up one book and then starting another series. So I started off with revisiting the Shades of Magic trilogy by V.E. Schwab. The first one is A Darker Shade of Magic. I read this one and half of the second one almost 10 years ago, and I wish I had just seen it through then because I didn't vibe with this series now, unfortunately. V.E. Schwab's writing is always fantastic, and I did really enjoy her writing in these books. These books are about, you're following your main character on the cover here, Kel, and he can basically travel between alternate versions of London. So in this world, there's 4 different Londons. There's black, red, gray, and white. 3 of them have various forms of magic, and then gray London would be like our real world London without magic. And he's traveling around, and he works for this royal family in Red London, and basically he runs into our second main character, Lila, who lives in Grey London, doesn't know about magic, and she's basically like a thief and or a pickpocket, whatever you want to say. And they meet each other, and it basically launches this magical quest and journey to defeat the bad guys, defeat the magic. I didn't really vibe with these, which I was very disappointed. I gave this one a generous rating, which was 3.5 stars. In my heart now, it's probably like a 3, but it's whatever. Heavy, heavy, heavy world building in this book, which I usually don't mind, but it was really a lot. A lot of cringy moments. I didn't really care about the characters that much. Their relationship didn't make sense to me. It kind of felt like it was grounded on nothing. And then every conflict that they reached, they got out of way too quickly and way too easily, and it wasn't believable. And it just had me kind of rolling my eyes. So I decided to push through and see if book two would get any better. And book two is A Gathering of Shadows. This is a 500-page book, and it felt like 1,000 pages long. I gave this one a 2.75 stars. I just didn't care. Again, same complaints as the first one. And also, these books feel very disjointed to me. This felt like a totally different book than the first one. I don't know if that's just me or if other people feel that way, but I really did not care. This had a magical competition element that I found really boring, surprisingly. And I just didn't understand why we really even needed that in this book. And I don't know. I'm going to stop rambling. I'm not going to continue the series. I do have the third book, and I just decided I'm not going to read it. As much as I would love to have said that I read the entire trilogy this month, it's not worth it to me to push through a series that I don't care about. So that's that. Then I went into Lepfona by Otessa Moshfegh. I was trying to decide if this author would be for me or not, and I've decided that she is not, but let's talk about it. So I've never felt more torn about how to rate a book ever, and I did ultimately give this a 3-star rating, just right down the middle, because what was this book? At the beginning, I was really liking it. I pretty heavily annotated this book for only giving it 3 stars because Otesha Moshfegh is really good at what she does. Like, this book objectively is very good. She is a fantastic writer. She draws you into the story. It's very atmospheric. This book is really hard to describe. It's essentially about this village, which is Lepfona. That's the name of the village. And they're basically like religious extremists. You're just following like a little shepherd boy who doesn't really have much family. His father hates him. And he ends up going to live with the village's lord and governor. This book is really just about the dangers of authority that goes unchecked, power and authority that goes unchecked, how people can use religion to like as a tool for harm and for evil. It's about the depravity of humans and human nature. And yeah, I just thought that it definitely got its point across, but this book is really, really dark and really unsettling, and it's gross. There's a lot of gross things in this book that turned my stomach. And I read a lot of messed up books, but this one I almost had to put down because it was too much for me. And I'm honestly surprised I was able to get through it. I really had to power through. I don't think I would recommend this. I don't think I could even recommend this to anybody, even if I did end up loving it. I don't think Otessa Moshfegh is for me. After that, I needed to switch up to something a little bit more just like normal and heartwarming. So I read my first Fredrik Backman book, and that is Anxious People. I gave this a 4 stars. I loved this book. It was so, so good. And I am just absolutely enamored with this author's writing. I think he was born to write. He has such a talent and such a gift. I wish I had annotated this book, but I swear it would have taken me so long because every line you could underline and take something away from. Every line is beautifully crafted, and I just loved it. This book is about a kind of like an accidental hostage situation. And that's really all you need to know because it's less about the plot. It's more about the human condition. It's a look into mental health. And there's a line from a song by the band Dawes, and it says, "It's really hard to hate anyone when you know what they've been through." And that's like this book personified. I just thought it was absolutely beautiful. It's emotional. And I think it was just so well done. And I highly recommend this. I ate this up. I read it like within 24 hours because I was just loving it so much. The last book I read is my favorite book from this month and my favorite book I've read so far this year. I absolutely love this. I could talk about it forever. I could make my own video on this, and I don't know, maybe I will if I'm feeling crazy. I read The Will of the Many by James Islington. I gave this a 4.5 stars. This was so close to being a 5-star. I just couldn't quite give it a full 5, but I am absolutely sure that further books in this series will be 5 out of 5 stars because this was absolutely incredible. This book is a Roman Empire inspired sci-fi fantasy novel. Basically, you're in this society called the Hierarchy, and that basically explains what you need to know. Like, the magic system is called Will, And it's basically a massive pyramid scheme. So all of the people at the bottom cede their will to the next people up and up the pyramid until you have the people at the very top who don't have to cede their will to anybody and have like the strength of everybody else below them. And will just basically makes you like super strong and powerful and godlike the further up you get. If you've read Red Rising, you're probably wondering, like, oh, this sounds exactly the same as Red Rising. And the similarities are very much there, even in the plot. I think this book executed all of those themes and the plot 10 times better than Red Rising did. Hot take, maybe. I don't know. But I absolutely ate this book up. The writing is incredible. This author is an amazing writer. I am absolutely obsessed. The atmosphere of this book, the plot, the characters, the political intrigue, it's all there. This book has everything, has a little bit of romance if you're really into that. This book has something for everyone. I wish I could force everybody in my life to read this book because it was so good. This book is 700 pages long, and I was never bored for a single second. Every time I put this book down or I had to go to work or anything like that, I was thinking about this book and itching to get back to it. And I think that's just a testament to how good this book is. There's a reason it is on people's favorites of the year from both 2023 and 2024. And I need book two like so bad it's not even funny. I would like rob somebody's house for like I would rob James Islington for a rough draft of book two, which I know he's working on. So that's a joke, but but it's also not because I was obsessed with this. It was so good. I'm not doing it justice, but if you like dark academia vibes, if you like high stakes fantasy with political intrigue, if you like fleshed out characters and complex character dynamics and relationships, if you were a fan of the Hunger Games back in the day, like if any of those things interest you, this book has it all. I could go on and on, but I absolutely adored this book. And I think that as the books later in the series continue coming out, this is probably going to be one of my favorite series of all time, be like one of my Hall of Fame books because this was incredible and I can't wait. I can't wait to keep reading this series. And having to wait between books 2 and 3 and however many books are plotted for this is going to be so painful because I think book 2 is plotted to come out this year and I already have like no patience. I have the worst book hangover from this. I just want to keep reading this over and over again until book 2 comes out. So yeah, I could keep rambling about this for a very long time, but I have a more in-depth review on my Goodreads and my Instagram if you're not following me there. And yeah, the only reason this wasn't a 5-star, I didn't even talk about that. I had a really hard time visualizing this book. Like I couldn't visualize the characters, I couldn't visualize the world. And after I finished this book, I kind of looked into other reviews and things, and I wasn't the only one that had that problem. So I find that kind of interesting. And I wish that the magic system and the world was a little bit more expounded upon because I was pretty confused throughout this book, especially in part 1. I just didn't understand will, and I didn't understand seeding will and how people get so much power. It's not really explained in detail. I don't think it necessarily took away from the story, but I'm looking forward to seeing if we get more of that in the further books in this series. But either way, absolutely incredible book. You should read this. If you don't read any other book from this video, read this one. But yeah, those are the 9 books that I read in January. I had a great reading month, and I'm already off to a great start in February as well. Not to spoil anything, but yeah, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you feel so inclined, and I will see you in the next one.